Stanley, thank you. Joining me now, Titus Nichols and Vinoo Varghese, both criminal defense attorneys and people that study the law, both of you guys. Titus, your reaction first at the death of Justice Ginsburg. What did you feel when you found out of and heard of her passing?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. What's natural is for everyone to recognize the great loss that not just the country, the court, but her family has experienced. They've lost someone who has loved them and they have loved for many, many decades. And now that she has passed away from her long-standing and brave battle with cancer, the focus is going to move away from the recognizing that sadness to the unfortunate political battle that's going to take place with her passing.
Vinoo, she said in July she wanted to stay on as long as she could do it full strength. Mentally, she was sharp as a tack. In the last oral argument, she participated from a hospital room, but boy, did she participate. She was right there, didn't lose a beat. She told a granddaughter, apparently, reportedly just a few days before her passing, a few days ago, that her goal was to hang on until the presidential election had come and gone. The focus of her, and her mind was sharp as a tack, but her body was failing for a long period of time, especially this year, starting in the spring, then in the summer, when the cancer had migrated throughout her body. Yes, she had some successful surgeries, but she really wanted to, did she not, hang on here until at least the first week of November and the election?
Definitely, and apparently her dying wish, it's on Twitter right now, is that she wanted to hang on until after the election. She did not want a Trump appointee to become the next Supreme Court justice. So we'll know whether she was successful in 40 days or however long it takes to count absentee ballots. I think people will always remember her, for her tenacity, her sharp wit, her relationship with Justice Scalia. And for me, as a criminal defense lawyer, I really greatly appreciate the fact that she and Justice Gorsuch challenged the majority in a 7-2. They were the lone dissenters, Gorsuch and Ginsburg, in trying to overrule the doctrine of separate sovereigns, allowing the federal government to prosecute something that was not successful at the state level. So I think when you look at this, she's a woman who's true to the Constitution, true to her beliefs, and she will go on in history probably more famous than maybe not any Supreme Court justice, but she'll be known and recognized up there.
Titus, these are images from this evening in front of the Supreme Court, people gathering there, paying respects to her. These are not lawyers from around the country that have run to Washington, D.C. These are people that have been affected by her, but in a way that I'm just not sure another Supreme Court justice would have and has in history had an effect on just regular folks. For some reason, she was able to permeate and touch people around the world, really, and we're seeing evidence of it here. What was it about her?
Honestly, the only other Supreme Court justice I can think that has had this powerful of effect on, like you said, just regular people is former Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, and how his advocacy as an attorney and then his rulings as a judge really resonated with people who aren't lawyers. I believe her effect was her honesty, her genuineness in how she believed. She stuck to what she believed in, and she didn't bow to political pressures or whatever the popular winds were at the moment. She believed in doing her job and focusing on the law. And also she believed that it was her responsibility and obligation as a woman to stand up for her rights as well as the rights of others, and not to simply just go along with whatever was popular.
And to that point, Vinoo, in the late stages of her life, in her 80s, she seemed to be gaining popularity and connecting with young people. Shanley talked about that event in Arkansas just last year, the notorious RBG, the movie made her. This is her speaking in Arkansas, people coming out like it's a rock concert to listen to an 85-year-old woman at the time just talk about her life, and people wanted to listen. Why?
Well, she transcended the law. I mean, how many people can say that? How many lawyers can say that they transcended the law? I mean, she did it as a practitioner with her work with the ACLU. She did it as a Supreme Court justice. I remember Bush versus Gore and her talking about in her dissent, saying, I might agree with the Chief Justice if I were to interpret Florida law, but since we're not supposed to be doing that, I dissent. I mean, she, had a certain wit about her, and she was a trailblazer. And we're waiting on. I to be honest, I don't think there's going to be anyone like her in terms of personality, somebody that transcends the court, that is accessible to everyday people. And I think a lot of it was her humble beginnings, which she talked about, that speech you showed a short while ago, talking about being a garment worker, a textile worker from New York, and the Supreme Court justice. What's the difference? One generation. It's inspiring. And as the colleague said, it's unfortunate that over the next 40 days, that's not what's going to be remembered. It's going to be remembered as the World War III, the most bitter partisan fight you're going to see in our country's history to pick the next Supreme Court justice.
Titus, what's going to happen over the next few weeks and month and a half, 2 months before the next president or President Trump serves a second term, January 20th or so?
It's like what my colleague, Mr. Varghese, just said. It's going to be a bitter, bitter World War III fight to the end. Essentially, what's going to happen is the Republicans have a majority in the Senate. So therefore, any name that President Trump selects is going to be voted on. Now, they might take the much more cunning political approach and wait until after the election to actually put up the vote, because at that point, the votes will be already in. And therefore, the vulnerable Republicans won't have to worry about, if I vote this way, how will that affect my chance of being reelected? Even if the Republicans lose control of the Senate after the election, they'll still be in power until January, at which point they can always take up the vote during the lame duck session.
Vinoo, though, if you're talking about a very streamlined effort here when you figure in the background checks, the confirmation process, the confirmation hearings that need to take place. This would have to move at lightning speed for this to come to a vote. And if there is any sort of hiccup, if there is an issue with the candidate, think back to Robert Bork, where if there's something that derails this, the nominee that is going to be put forward, we heard it tonight, Mitch McConnell says that he does plan to hold a vote for the replacement of Justice Ginsburg, but it would have to move seamlessly, would it not?
Well, I think that Mitch McConnell, who's often parodied, on the internet as a turtle, is going to become the rabbit, the hare that flies through this process. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And as far as hiccups, well, Justice Kavanaugh had a major hiccup, and it was only delayed a week, basically. There were calls to relaunch or further do investigations. Look, one thing that Kavanaugh had going for him was the fact that he was a circuit court judge, and that he had been vetted at multiple levels before this, before the Supreme Court. So that helped the case and prevented further delay. I think that something like that, similarly, if President Trump picks somebody who is a sitting circuit court judge, then you'll probably move faster than if you were to pick Ted Cruz, maybe. But then again, he's a senator, so who knows, right? Yeah. This will be, just beyond reality television over the next 45 days or however days it is to the election.
All right, both of you stay where you are if you don't mind. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll have more reaction. It's pouring in from around the world over the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You're watching Court TV, your front row seat to justice. Welcome back to Court TV and our continuing coverage of the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg at the age of 87, passing away this evening in Washington, D.C., at home, surrounded by family. The court announced her death 2.5 hours ago, and John Roberts, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, said, "Our nation has lost a jurist of historic stature." President Trump has commented on her death, saying she lived a wonderful life, as has presidential nominee Joe Biden talked about the effect that Ruth Bader Ginsburg has had on this country during her lifetime. That's a look this evening outside the Supreme Court in Washington. People gathering there to pay their respects. You can see that the flag is flying at half staff. Court TV anchor Michael Ayala is with us. And Michael, you have some of we know how she's affected pop culture as of late, RBG, and she's just really a unique individual, and also had a real effect on the law in terms of her decisions and her dissents over her career.
Yeah, I think this is a good point. We're talking a lot about the person. Well, let's hear her own words from some of her own decisions, which I think will give you some sense of why she was so beloved. I'm going to start with the United States versus Virginia. That's the case, the VMI military university allowing women to attend. She said the law stopping them was presumptively invalid, a law or official policy that denies to women, simply because they are women, an equal opportunity to aspire, achieve, participate in, and contribute to society based upon what they can do. And I think she probably had particular joy writing this decision for the majority of the court because, of course, she faced so much discrimination when she was in law school. Another one I want to point out for her decisions where she wrote for the majority is Friends of the Earth versus Laidlaw Environmental Services. This was in 2000. This was a case that allowed South Carolinians to sue corporations without having to prove injury. So if they were polluting in their community, they didn't have to prove injury. That alone was bad, so big case for tort law. She said a would-be polluter may or may not be dissuaded by the existence of a remedy on the books, but a defendant once hit in the pocketbook will surely think twice before polluting again. Again, standing up for the little man, the everyday person. I want to look at a couple of dissents because oftentimes the most entertaining part of Supreme Court decisions are the dissents. Many times they're ahead of their time. Many times eventually they become a part of law as the thinking of the rest of the country moves forward. Let's look at Bush v. Gore. Again, this was the case where they stopped the recount and allowed Bush to go into office. The court's conclusion that a constitutionally adequate recount is impractical is a prophecy the court's own judgment will not allow to be tested. Such an untested prophecy should not decide the presidency of the United States. Again, the court shouldn't make those decisions, and she was very vocal about that. Next one I want to point out is Shelby County versus Holder. Now, again, this was one striking down provisions of the Voting Act. And she says, and this was in 2013, she wrote in the dissent, throwing out preclearance when it has worked and is continuing to work to stop discriminatory changes is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you are not getting wet. Now, I think this perfectly sums up who she was. She stood for the people who didn't have umbrellas, who were getting wet. And so if she was saying, if it's not affecting you, then maybe you don't feel what the people who are getting wet are feeling. And she stood for those people. And I think that's really what made her very, very much the beloved justice she was.
Yeah, great examples of how she really was an advocate for people that really didn't have a voice at the table. Titus, Nichols, and Vinoo Varghese are with us. Michael, thank you as well. Titus, to that point where Michael was just talking about, also joining us is Christa Ramey from Los Angeles. Christa, good to see you. Titus, picking up where Michael just left off, this idea that she really was this voice for the voiceless.
Absolutely. And it's what made it so radical was that she was advocating for the reality that women deserved equal treatment, equal rights as anyone else. In fact, she was once quoted as saying that the Supreme Court would be more fair once there. And someone asked, well, how many women would be enough to sit on the Supreme Court? And she said 9. And she said there used to be 9 men on the Supreme Court and no one said a word about it. So why not have 9 women? And I think that just illustrates her position of advocating and making sure that women had a seat at the table, and that in advocating for herself, because her belief was that if you didn't push for yourself, it wouldn't happen. You had to stand up for what you believed in and not allow outside forces to tell you that you were wrong.
Christa, how will she be remembered?
You know, Ted, I am completely convinced that I would not be an attorney but for her and women like her before her. I still get asked when I walk into depositions and into courtrooms whether or not I'm a court reporter, and it is not assumed that I am the trial lawyer. I think that women everywhere, no matter what profession that they are in, she has helped us in our professions, whether it is an attorney or an executive or a social worker. She or a teacher or whomever, because of her and because of her voice and how powerful her voice is, and was and will remain, I think it will be eternal. Our lives have forever been changed because she lived.
Vinoo, will she leave a mark different than other justices in history?
I would absolutely say so. I mean, there's no one that has transcended the law the way that she has and touched ordinary people. Just to hear from my colleague saying that she wouldn't have been a lawyer but for her, I mean, it's inspiring. Very few lawyers have had the impact inside and outside the court. And to have her, in pop culture the way that she is a testament to her, not in any sort of negative way. Sometimes lawyers, they get a little highbrow, they look down upon things that are in pop culture. But here you have a woman on the Supreme Court who transcended all that. I mean, Samuel Adams had a line of beer after her last year. I mean, but when you go back and look at her career, she was somebody who actually argued before the Supreme Court and won 5 or 6 cases that she had argued before the Supreme Court. So her legacy is both as a practitioner, as a person who came from humble beginnings, to a person who is at the top of the legal profession and is not just known in America, but known around the world because of her ability to transcend popular culture and get besides the books and the ivory towers. So yes, she'll absolutely be remembered.
Titus, Nichols, how does it change the balance of the court? And set aside that it's a guarantee that President Trump will nominate and there'll be a Republican-nominated new justice. Whether it's someone from the left or someone from the right, the bottom line is she is now out of the mix, and she was such a force. And how does her vacating that seat, of her death, how does it change the balance of the court and change the way the court works?
There was no question that Justice Ginsburg was a part of the progressive wing. You could call it liberal wing, but the progressive wing. And without her voice there, that's one less powerful agent to push for progressive rulings and decisions and just careful considerations of the Constitution and what it does not allow. And while it's almost guaranteed that the Republican Senate will nominate and confirm a conservative justice, the lack of Justice Ginsburg's voice is going to be felt in subsequent decisions.
Christa, the fact that she wouldn't be there let's say somebody else, there was another open seat and she was still there, her voice was so unique and so powerful and steeped in the law. It's a big loss, is it not? Just not either side, but for our country to have someone of that stature on the court.
I keep hearing a lot of your wonderful male guests tonight and in earlier hours this evening comment upon how she is a recent pop culture figure. I met her 20 years ago, and I was a geeky recent law school graduate, and who knew everything about her. And I think that women everywhere, whether or not they know it, not only that, have that sense of understanding what she means to our lives, our livelihoods, and our professions, our personal lives, our bodies, our choices. There will not ever be a voice like hers again. I worry for my daughter's future. I worry for all of my girlfriends' daughters' futures. Because her voice was someone's voice that could not be questioned. She had such great respect from, Justice Anton Scalia when he was alive. He didn't agree with her on a lot of things, on most things, really, when it came to the practice of law. But he had deep respect for her opinions and her beliefs. And so I think that we're never going to get to have this voice again with this sort of power because of the trailblazing she did, by the way. If it wasn't for her work with the ACLU, I don't know that she would be as powerful of a figure as she is now. I would say now that our vote is more important than ever. And I do worry for my daughter's future.
Christa, you talked about being a little geeky, just finished law school. That photo we saw, that was you with Justice Ginsburg. Boy, you sure were. You look like you're next to a rock star with your glasses. That's priceless. I love that.
My glasses are a little bit more fashionable now, but I look like it's like those Forrest Gump photos from the movie. It looks like she's not really there posing with me, but it was at my law school. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Great story. All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll have more of the life of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Stay with us. You watch Court TV, your front row seat to justice. Titus Nichols, Christa Rennie, and Vinoo Varghese are still with me and have been all evening picking up there. I mean, just listening to her in that confirmation hearing, Titus, the way she explains, changing the word sex to gender, there's something about her. I mean, you're just attracted to her.
Absolutely. And the fact that her and her assistant were focused on what was the best way to be persuasive demonstrates just her legal mind, just how tenacious she was. In writing her brief, she was looking at what is the reader's interpretation of this going to be? And that's what she wanted to focus on because she realized that was the best way to persuade the readers and the judges on the bench to see the law in her perspective.
As we look at the crowd gathering outside of the court in Washington this evening, people coming to pay their respects. And if you look at these people, these are young people, some middle-aged folks. But Christa, these aren't, the law students. These are everyday folks. I'm sure there are some law students there, but she was able to transcend that, the world of law, and really did make an impact on young women, especially everywhere, no matter what they were trying to accomplish. She was a role model.
Yeah, she was, absolutely. I think that the VMI case probably was the start of that, getting that rolling. We've always been told as women that we can, by our mothers, that we can do anything a man can do. You want to be president, you can do that. I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg helped pave the way to make us all believe that it was possible. We can be fighter pilots, we can be firemen, we can be justices on the Supreme Court. And I think she just had that kind of impact that transcended not just our profession, but every profession. And, my daughter today, who's 23-year-old school teacher, was very upset about her loss. And she does not know Ruth Bader Ginsburg because I read her a book about the notorious RGB, or BG rather, when she was little. She knows it. She knows her because of what she did for all of us. And so I think that it's pretty powerful. And I love seeing all those young bodies out in front of the Supreme Court showing their respect for the impact that she made on all of our lives.
Yeah, well said. And Vinoo, to that point, the next few months, yes, weeks, it is going to be who's next. There's going to be a lot of fighting, but history is going to remember her in a unique way. She has made a mark which is very unique, not only on this city, Washington, D.C., but this country. Your final thoughts?
She's always going to be the one that transcended the law, and in so many different ways. I mean, who else? What other justice has gotten her name so well into pop culture. Like being played on Saturday Night Live. I mean, and as a colleague said, that she inspired her to become a lawyer, and she's going to inspire lots of women, lots of people to become a lawyer. Can you say the same thing about Clarence Thomas? I don't think so. So I think that her mark is going to be long-reaching, long-lasting. Unfortunately, you have a situation that she's going to be forgotten after the next couple days, and it's going to be until after the election, and one that's going to be about who's taking her place. It's not going to be somebody that's like her. It's going to be somebody very different, and that's unfortunately going to be part of her legacy. And depending on if Trump loses, so if Trump loses and a Supreme Court justice is put in, then that'll be part of her legacy. If Trump wins, then it's not an issue.
All right, well said. I want to thank all of our guests, Titus Nichols, Christa, Ramey, and Vinoo Varghese. Thank you all for your insights tonight and helping us through this breaking news coverage for the last few hours. We're going to step aside, take a break. We'll be back with more right after this.